St. Paul today, we learned how attorneys for Thomas Lane, J. Alexander King, and Tou Thao plan to fight for their clients, and how aggressively the prosecution plans to go after them on the civil rights charges.
The first witness for the government also took the stand at the end of the day. Lauren was the pool reporter inside the courtroom today. And Lauren, it seems like things were moving pretty quickly as we expected from this federal trial. Opening statements took most of the day. Could we start with a breakdown of the prosecution's direction? So it focused on the failure for the officers to intervene and offer medical aid rather than their intentions?
Oh, that's right. The prosecutors don't have to prove that these three former police officers meant for George Floyd to die, or that they even necessarily knew that he was dying. What they have to prove is that they willfully stood by and did not render medical aid, and that they also did not intervene as Derek Chauvin used excessive force. Now, it's really just Tou Thao and J. Alexander King charged with that count. So yeah, prosecutors were focused on the fact that these officers, in their words, didn't lift a finger, even as George Floyd over and over said he can't breathe.
Yeah, and Lauren, you being the pool reporter inside the courtroom, this trial is different from the Derek Chauvin trial in that there are no cameras allowed in federal courts. So you're in there. What does the jury makeup look like?
Yeah, I mean, it's typical in Minnesota, actually. That was unusual for the Chauvin trial to have cameras in the courtroom. Federal trials never have cameras. So, you know, this is actually more typical in that we don't have the sort of access that we had during Chauvin. Being in the courtroom, I was able to get a look at the jury. The jury in a federal trial comes from all over the state, not just Hennepin County. And partially, perhaps because of that, it is a very white jury. The jurors were overwhelmingly white. 2 jurors appear to be of Asian descent. They span the age range, but there are a number of jurors who appear older, maybe in their 50s, 60s, even 70s, in there watching. Now, what I can tell you, though, is these jurors were attentive throughout the entire day today. They watched closely, and they leaned in and were really intent when that video was being played. They played the entire 35 minutes of Thomas Lane's body cam video. Obviously disturbing to watch. We saw some of that during the Chauvin trial, but these jurors, they leaned in, they watched, they paid attention.
Yeah, and I saw that they were mostly taking notes as well. Somebody was tweeting that as well. And so of the 3 attorneys representing the 3 officers, Thomas Lane's attorney, Earl Gray, was most direct, saying that he intends to point to the lack of direction from the most senior officer, that is Derek Chauvin in this case. Did it feel like the other 2 officers or the attorneys of the other 2 officers were also kind of headed that way?
Yeah, well, if you've seen Earl Gray in court, as you did during the Kim Potter trial, he is always direct. That is Earl Gray's style. But it's interesting. Earl Gray, who's the attorney for Thomas Lane, and then the attorney for J. Alexander King, had many of the same arguments. These officers, they were saying, were rookies. They were only on the job a few days as full-fledged officers. Derek Chauvin had actually been King's field training officer, and that's something that his attorney made a big deal out of. And, you know, Lane's attorney said that also Lane may not have worked directly under Chauvin, but he worked in the precinct, had asked Derek Chauvin for advice. They viewed him as a superior officer. They called him sir. He had control over their careers. And so it's clear that their motive or their strategy here is going to be to point the finger squarely at Derek Chauvin.
Gotcha. Thank you so much for keeping an eye on this very complex trial.